But Pishuna says, Pishuna is another name for Narada actually. Oh no, not so. That is bhakti, that is devotion, not intelligence. You don't want somebody devoted to you as your senior management, right? You want somebody who can further your enterprise, who can take the enterprise forward. He should appoint those when appointed in a revenue generation role had made as much as the pre-agreed revenue or exceeded it on account of their proven qualities. These are not my words. I have just put English for the Sanskrit of Arthashastra. Narada is saying appoint performers. If he is performed in role n-1, take him to role n. Okay, there's also Murphy's law which says that everybody gets promoted to their highest level of incompetence. I don't know how many have heard of it. Peter's principle, Murphy's law, whatever we call it. So he is taking that view, and this is recorded 2003 years ago. God knows when he actually propounded that rule. But this is what we find there. It doesn't end here. Another teacher, Kaunapadanta, actually is a very convoluted name for Bhishma. He is the son of Kunapadanta. Kunapadanta is another name for Shantanu. Shantanu apparently was cursed by Ganga of having a very Kunapadanta actually means teeth reeking of a dead body, stinking teeth. Right? That's the shapa that he got from Ganga. You know that she deserted him and all, that he broke his vow when Bhishma was born. Therefore, to remember that Bhishma is also called Kaunapadanta, what does Bhishma say? No, he doesn't agree with Pishuna. Such people do not have the other qualities required of ministers. Yes, he might have been a performer in a role. That's why we talk about Peter's principle. What this Murphy's law or Peter's principle says that is, if there's a very good sales guy, you make him a sales manager. This guy was good at sales, but not at managing salespeople. Therefore, if you keep on looking only at past performance, you end up with everybody being promoted to their highest level of incompetence. He's incompetent as a sales manager. He'll stop getting promoted only when his incompetence is proven in that role. If he proves competent as sales manager, he'll become general manager. There, if he's incompetent, he'll stay there. If he is competent there, he'll become director, right? So that's the logic of this particular principle. And that's what Bhishma is also talking about, saying that there are other qualities needed apart from performance. Those whose fathers and grandfathers were ministers should be appointed as ministers on account of their familiarity with the past conduct. You need a broader knowledge, right? This is the kind of education that these people got. Those will not abandon him even if he misbehaves, as they are kin, as they are related. This is seen even amongst non-humans. Cows stay near their own herd, crossing other herds. Apparently, if you observe cows, even if they come across another herd, they don't think that this is a cow, I'm a cow. No, this is not my herd. The cow still keeps searching for its own herd. That's the observation given as what is called a drishtanta in Sanskrit. Now, Vata Vyadhi says this is again not so, right? They take control of everything and start acting like the master. If you appoint people from traditional families, we've actually seen this in AP and Telangana. You are aware of Karanams? No, the old village Karanams. They are supposed to be secretaries, but they have so much control because of hereditary knowledge that at one point the sarpanchas were powerless and the Karanam held the real power. That's why NTR, when he came in 83, he abolished Karanams completely. So it actually happens. That's what Vata Vyadhi is talking about. He says, make new people who know Niti Shastra as ministers. Don't go for these old guys. They are well connected. They have a deep network and they can make you a puppet. We saw this in Shivaji's dynasty. The Peshwas made the Maharaj almost a puppet, right? Peshwa still means a secretary kind of person. That's why we have this name called Peshi even today, right? We think of Peshwas as the rulers, though they were not, they were only ministers. But they came from hereditary family and they made the ruler a puppet. This is spoken about 2300 years ago, it still happens. A newbies treat the wielder of the rod, king, as occupying the position of Yama and therefore do not give offense. This is the reasoning of Vata Vyadhi. Next one. But Bahudanti Putra says no, that is not true. Those who only know Shastra fail in execution. Therefore he says, appoint those with good birth, Intellect, good birth means in the family of these ministers, intellect, integrity, valor, and loyalty as qualities alone are important. He's more or less now coming back to merit. I didn't really elaborate on many of these because I believe all of us are capable of it if we really consider them. Each one of these slides is worth maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes of discussion. But we know broadly where those will lead, where we'll agree, where we'll disagree. But I just again want to bring it to your attention that this is how Shastra flows, right? Especially the short Shastras, you have only have a small statement. You need to discuss that and kind of figure out what the intent of that teacher was. This is more like short notes or bullet points of those notes. Next. Now Kautilya says all is justified. See, he has done his literature review. Now he has to give his own opinion. So he says all of them are right. All of them are venerated teachers. They are not incorrect. They are all correct. For those who are taking snaps, sir, I can share this PPT, not an issue at all. So you can tell them that you can share it later. So I'll send it to Kapoor Saab and I'm sure he can share it to the members. All is justified, says Kautilya. The ability of a person can indeed only be known from his deeds. That's what Kautilya says. What he means is, look, whatever examples they give, for example, classmates' integrity, it is seen because you know his behavior. Somebody said, take a performer. It is seen because of his behavior. Therefore, he's saying, ability of a person can indeed be known only from his deeds. I agree with that. That's what he says. Then he adds his qualification. Having divided the pool of talent based on ability, each should be appointed in an appropriate position as a minister, but not as a counselor or advisor. Think of counselor advisor as board of directors, minister as senior management. Okay, why they should not be board of directors, you'll come to know shortly, right? So Kautilya has presented the earlier views coming from hoary past and kind of put them in the right place. Says that in each role, each quality might still have a place. I've summarized in the next slide as to what the various views are. The teachers are these: classmates, co-conspirators, those who saved the king earlier, proven performers, hereditary ministers, non-hereditary nithivits. It's not nitwits, nithivit. Nithivit means one who knows niti. Those with good qualities and all the above. The important qualities are trustworthiness, leverage, loyalty, intelligence, kinship, fear, and various qualities and suitability. I'm leaving it at this because in our own roles, only some of these are applicable. Some of them are more applicable, some are not applicable. We are all capable of making the judgment, but let us have a discussion. Let us not act as if appointing classmates is something which is not very right or which only Desi Lala companies do. No, everybody does it, right? Microsoft, where I work. It's a valid principle of recruitment, right? So I just want a discussion to happen and decisions we obviously take depending on our own situation. Next one. Having talked about this, I'll go to the next topic, testing. What is testing? We said this is a theory, right? How we should recruit. I'm not talking about the process of interviews and tests, no. Why should we stop after recruitment? Should we not go out and test whether they have these qualities? So in the next chapter again, you'll have similar detailed sentences, but now that you got a, glimpse of how Shastra works, I've summarized what testing means. There are 4 tests prescribed, and these are age-old tests, not just Arthashastra tests. He's only summarizing it. First test is called test of piety, or dharma. There the scheme is like this. The king will publicly sack his Purohita for doing something wrong. For example, their Shastra says so-and-so person can do so-and-so yajna, so-and-so person cannot do so-and-so yajna, and so on and so forth. So if the Purohita refuses a certain instruction based on Shastra, king will get angry, apparently, and dismiss him publicly, saying that you talk Shastra to me whereas I am ordering you something. Then this Purohita goes to various ministers and says, now look at this king, he wants me to teach Vedas to somebody who doesn't have ability, qualification for that. This is so much against the Shastras, we should dispose this king. Right? We should have a king who will support dharma. If the minister agrees, he is correct. His loyalty should be to the king. This is only a test. If he does not agree, he defends the king saying that no, there's a reason why he did this. he also knows Shastras, this is a situation, whatever. Then this minister has passed the test of piety. So the king is supposed to employ secret agents to test his ministers. You cannot give them the full reins of power without testing. The second test is test of wealth. A Senapati, in fact my name also means Senani only. Senani is equal to Senapati. He is supposed to be sacked publicly again for talking with some cruel people. And then he goes back to the ministers and says, look, I was just ascertaining all this, but this king has misunderstood me. You know what? All of us together can make a better kingdom. I'll give you so much wealth, he'll bribe them. That's a test of wealth. Test of lust. A very confidant approaches a minister suggesting that the chief queen is in love with him. Right? If this minister falls for it, he failed the test of lust. This test of fear. One minister, the trusted one, is asked to arrange a gathering of all the other ministers. Right? They could be going on a picnic, it could be a party. And when they're all together in one room, they're all arrested, being accused of treason. They're put in prison. And then in the prison, it will be leaked to them that they're going to be hanged for treason. So these people now have the fear of their life. At that time, a proposal for a coup is made. Right? If all of you support me and turn public opinion, we can do this, etc., etc. If they succumb in this fear, they fail the test of fear. So these are the 4 tests prescribed in Shastra. And Shastra says, Arthashastra, somebody who's passed the test of piety should be appointed to the judiciary. This guy knows dharma properly and he will not do wrong things in the name of dharma. Therefore, he can go to the judiciary. Somebody who passed the test of wealth should go to administration and treasury. Somebody who passed the test of lust should be in charge of palace security. And he's the only one allowed in Antapura. Right? Somebody who passed the test of fear should be allowed near the king. Not everybody else can come physically close to the king. Only those who pass this test of fear. Now, somebody who passed all the 4 tests, they should be made counselors or advisors. They are the ones fit for your board of directors. There are some who fail all the tests, right? They fail in each one of them. You should still not sack them. Keep them in mines, factories, forests for procurement of honey, etc., and elephant forests. Why lose good people? Yes, you know they are corrupt, but still use them. They pose no danger to you when thrown away from the capital like this. So this is the kind of testing that Arthashastra talks about. Now, Kautilya's view is, ancient teachers laid down the appointment of ministers based on these tests, but Kautilya opines that neither the king nor the queen should be made the target for the sake of these tests. The test should not involve the chief queen or coup. Why? Poisoning is an irreversible process. Let us say that we take a glass of milk and add a drop of poison. Can we remove the poison? We cannot. In the mind of these ministers, once you put this idea, all their life they might be working towards these 2 goals. So Kautilya says, do not make king or queen the object of this test, make it something else. Again, a flavor of the kind of discussion. All respected teachers received Shastra, but a teacher differs from it and gives his reasons for it. Next one. Now you might be thinking, isn't this not too much? I invite your attention to this slide. It's a world map with company logos. That's because somebody tracked the top 100 economic entities based on revenue, and guess what? Only 29 of them are states. 71 are actually companies. If you look at the top 100 revenue earning entities in the world based on 2007 revenues for both companies and governments, 71 are companies. 29 are states. So when I say that Rajadharma is the framework today, today's large companies, I work in one such called Microsoft, they're bigger than many countries. So why are they not acting like countries? Even in countries, we see that for critical posts, you need security clearance. But what is the clearance for top management? Background check. Who does the background check? In controllers, we used to pay somebody some 1,200 rupees to do a background check, 9 background checks. They apparently check all police stations, whether the case is there or not, whether the resume is right or not. Nonsensical tests. These should be the tests for top management. Are we doing it? Yet we kind of give the keys to our treasury to them. If small states can do security clearances, why should large companies not think of it? I don't know what your test is going to be, but I submit that think along those lines. For example, today's sexual harassment allegations are very common. Acts are also very common, let me say not just allegations. But a mere allegation can destroy a lot of value in a company. If I'm allowed excuse for bringing Infosys back, they had a top sales guy, Fanish Murthy, right? After he left, the stock actually fell. A lot of value erosion happened. If Fanish Murthy was made to pass the test of lust, would this have happened? As I said, there are 1,000 people for a given job. It's not that only one person can do it. Human beings are infinitely capable. So, again, drawing your attention, this testing is maybe something that we can think of. This is a chart with the top 100 economic entities. You'll see a lot of red there because all those are companies. The black ones are the states. And this is going to change only towards red, more and more towards red, not towards black. Only few countries like India are growing. India is at some 200 billion in this. It is now a bit more than that, 350 or so, right? But companies are growing at a faster rate. When Aramco comes, it will kind of come on top. China Commercial Bank comes, again it will come on top, etc., etc. Next section. Till now, we've seen Arthashastra. And remember, these Shastras are composed at the time when there were no writing material. All transmission was oral. Therefore, there was an emphasis on concision, on precision, on being concise. You will see that Arthashastra is very, very tight. In one line, it is worth 10 minutes discussion. But epics are different. They are like storytelling. There, your 10 minutes of description can be reduced to one line. So I'll take 2 chapters from Mahabharata, giving you again a flavor of how that looks like. The thinking is not different, but it is much more verbose. It keeps on repeating. They say that it's called Abhyasa. Repetition is called Abhyasa in Shastra. And Abhyasa is for the sake of implanting it in the minds of people, in the minds of students, they say. So please bear with me if Mahabharata is going to be a bit more verbose. Therefore, what scheme I've done is, on the right side of your slide, I've put all the literal translations. Left side, I've just summarized it for us. Okay. Anybody who knows who Dhaumya is? Okay, Dhaumya is the Purohita of Pandavas. He was appointed immediately after the marriage of Draupadi with the Pandavas, when Pandavas came out of their hiding. Right? So it was said that everybody must have a Purohita. Purohita is Hitam Puraskaroti iti Purohitaha, who keeps the hita, that is well-being of the Yajamana in front. Such a person is called Purohita. Puraskaroti is keeping in front. So when these Pandavas are supposed to go on their Ajñatavasa, their incognito stay, there's a problem. These guys were princes all around. They do not know how to behave like courtiers. They were never subservient to anybody, right? So he teaches them the science of being a counselor, or how to behave like a counselor, just before they embark upon their Ajñatavasa in Matsya Desha, in the court of King Virat. That's the background. So he says the king, who is a deity in embodied form. This is Haifanda English for saying that Murti Bhavinchina Daivamu, God in corporeal form. Is like the great fire sanctified with all the mantras. The language of Mahabharata will be like this. On the right side is a literal translation. The summary of that is, treat the king with respect. In fact, there's an old Aryokti, Na Vishnu Prithvi Patihi, Na Avishnuhu Prithvi Patihi. One who is a non-Vishnu, who doesn't have an Amsha of Vishnu, cannot be a king. So our culture is a very establishment-oriented one. No matter what happened, if somebody is coronated the king, he is treated like Vishnu, because if you do not have an Amsha of Vishnu, you cannot become king. That's the belief. That's how pro-establishment the entire system was. You just had to sit on the throne and had to get this Abhisheka done with. That's it. Then you are legitimate. Once you are there, everybody tries to interpret everything in your favor. Okay, so because of belief in Karma Siddhanta and all, it said that if you finally succeed to become a king, you are verily a Vishnu for us. That's the reason why they say treat king like a god. So this is the entire paradigm. What do we have on the other side? Oh, hi Steve or hi Satya. Satya Nadella is the boss of Microsoft. I have to kind of force upon myself a paradigm of equality. Hey, are we not all men? Are we not equal? Shastra is saying something very different. No, sir, you're not equal. King is God. CEO is God. Okay, don't take it literally. But what I'm trying to say is, look at the difference. Our ancient wisdom is saying that it has to be a different paradigm. That's all I'm trying to say. So the leader deserves the respect that we give to God. That's the kind of thing I want to bring out here. And every small act acquires meaning. So great care should be exercised to avoid suspicion. People, kind of leave their footwear before going to a temple. Why? You don't leave your clothes. Footwear is also clothes for your feet, right? Every small act, it acquires meaning. It has to show respect. Right? That's what this paradigm implies. So the way you sit, the way you talk, where you sit, all of them come. When we're talking about no one should desire a seat which other may covet. He who does not, don't sit on the king's chair, don't sit on the king's elephant, don't sit on the king's horse, etc., etc. It goes on. Next one. No unsolicited advice. No one should unasked offer counsel. You are a minister, but you cannot offer advice if you are not asked for. Very clearly said. A wise person should not contact friendship with the king's wife, nor the inmates of the inner apartment, that is Antapura, nor with those who are objects of royal displeasure. Summary is that be loyal and seen to be as loyal. It's not sufficient if you're loyal. You should be seen as being loyal. Every act of yours should reinforce that. And be blind to the follies of king. Right? King is a human being, right? He has his follies. He will fail. But they say be blind, completely blind, as if you are not even aware of that this is a folly. That's the advice given. Whatever is the role given, that should be discharged without negligence. Pramada is the word used in the sloka. Pride or anger. In the corporate setup, often what happens is whenever there's a change in role, a lot of perceived slights. Oh no, I'm so talented. I'm capable of much bigger things. What is this nonsensical role I'm being given? Okay. People make a big scene. They are called high maintenance managers. You have to console them, cajole them, waste time in telling that. Shastra is saying don't do all this drama. Okay. If you're given a role, discharge it without pride, without negligence, without anger. Right? There's a lot spoken about what you should speak. So for example, there is one thing which says Satyam Bruyat. Then it says Priyam Bruyat. Speak the truth, but speak which is pleasant. So what should I do if something which is true but not pleasant is there? If you can get away not speaking, don't speak. Right? In Arthashastra or in Rajaniti or Dandaniti, what they said is, truth which is good to hear is preferable. But when it is profitable, truth, even if unpleasant, should be spoken. It's not that all that devotion or whatever is that you should never say anything the king does not like. No. There might be many things that that are bad with the company, and we cannot do much about it. Let them be, right? We cannot do anything about it, so why talk about it and generally irritate this poor fellow? Right? Every meeting we can talk about it. What's the point? So we'll talk about unpleasant things only if there is a point, only if we can do something about it, only if it is profitable for the enterprise. So the general principle is, do not speak anything which is unpleasant. Before speaking, evaluate. Does it add value? Is it necessary? Only then talk about the unpleasant one. That's the advice of this chapter. The position of sitting should be appropriate. The prescribed position is right or left of king, not behind him. Behind the king is for his bodyguard, not in front of him, because that's more like a challenge, especially high seat before the king. In the current situation, we are going to a meeting or we are going for dinner, lunch with the CEO. Head of the table should go to the CEO or to the leader or the central seat, you be around, right? That's the kind of thing, but every small thing counts. That's what I'm trying to say. Disorderly conduct irritates the king and is not profitable. This scene is from what is normally called a darbar. Like a king is meeting various people. So the advice is that you should wait your turn till you can present your case to the king, asking for help or whatever. If you think you have a great emergency and you have the greatest misery and try to come in front, king will make a show of listening to you, but he is internally irritated. Therefore, you don't get a positively oriented king to even hear you. Great kings will kind of suppress that as well, but it's talking about the practical aspects, right? We have a town hall meeting, CEO is listening. Be orderly. Because disorderly conduct or unnecessary things will only rankle the king, and it's only harmful for you, all said and done. Simple thing. People actually practice this, but don't talk about it. Do not reveal any lies told by the king. See, it is said that when Yudhishthira was being taken to heaven, he was shown hell once. Because it is said that if you are a king, you cannot escape hell. Lies are there. You have to be harsh with people. You have to take decisions which are beneficial to 99 but might kill one. Right? So being a king, you cannot avoid it. So if you are aware of any lies told by the king, don't reveal it to anybody. Finally, do not think highly of yourselves. This is a great problem, especially with management graduates like my classmates. Oh, I am from IIM Ahmedabad. I know a lot of management theory. Sorry. In this company, CEO is the boss. Please do not think highly of yourselves. The one moment Dharmaraja Yudhishthira thought highly of his brother Arjuna, his identity was out. What happened is, after the almost the entire period was getting over, the Kauravas make a ploy to reveal these people in Matsya Desha. So their brother-in-law goes to the south, stealing the cattle of Virat Raja. So entire army and every soldier goes to the south fighting the brother-in-law of Duryodhana. Then sneakily on the north side, the entire Kauravas come to take away the cattle. Now these people are fighting, therefore the cattle still stay, right? Cattle used to be wealth. It is called Uttara Gograhanam. During that battle, only two people, Uttara Kumara and the eunuch, the dance teacher Bruhannala, which is Arjuna in disguise, fight and defeat Kauravas. So in the council, the king started praising, oh, my son is so great. He defeated the entire Kauravas single-handedly. Then Yudhishthira says, no sir, it is the valor of Bruhannala. Think highly of yourself. After 1 year of close friendship, king is very angry at Kankabhatta. Kanka is the name of Yudhishthira in disguise, and throws the dice. They were playing pachisi at him. So if you think highly of yourself, you're out. Body language is important, should be minded. I'm skipping the detailed part. It talks about how you should talk, how you should spit, be mild in everything, etc. Do not be exhilarated by reward, nor be depressed by disgrace. Be only mindful of king's welfare. This perceived disgrace is very, very common in a corporate situation, but oftentimes it's actually necessitated because of the external circumstances. You know, something like government liaison is seen as a dirty job, but sometimes your best tech guy might have to be put in that role because you're trying to explain your technology to government, right? I mean, we have Mr. Devendra Reddy with E-Ride here. He might think that he doesn't want his electrical engineer dealing with batteries to liaison with government at some point, but it might be required because that might alone be effective there. So this engineer should not feel that he's being given a dirty role of bribing people. This is not about bribing people, right? This is about communicating what is important for you and the industry. Do not disparage the king even after losing royal favor, right? This royal favor is a fickle thing. It comes and goes. So people might go out of a company, but do not disparage that company because you might have to come back there or might still be continuing there. So in short, if I can do do's, the do's are praise in presence and absence of the king. Be eager in accepting assignments. When acceptance is inevitable, why show hesitation? See, either you are in that company or not. If that is going to be the reality, why are you making a show of saying, I don't like this posting? Right? You don't like it, get out. But if you're going to be there, absolutely no point in showing any hesitation. So immediately accept it. Don't try to force an issue with the king. Show yourself to be better than the king. Very dangerous. or dress like the king, or laugh even heartily in the king's presence, or disclose royal secrets, or take bribes. So this is how this Dhaumya's advice goes. Now we need to look at what is the essence of it. The essence of it is that he's saying, look, there has to be a hierarchy. Let us not wish it away. There is a hierarchy. You need to accept it, internalize it, and demonstrate your acceptance. Because this hierarchy is important for implementation of decisions. Okay? A company or a court is not a democracy. All men are equal outside work. Right? When we are working, we have to agree on who is going to take what decisions, who is going to implement it. In HMA itself, for example, you might have somebody as office bearer, right? Somebody who is a member might be in a more senior position, but for the roles here, we have to respect it. The office bearer will get to decide certain things. That's it. So much is stake that there is no place for doubt. We see that companies are increasingly more powerful than states, right? So it might not be fair, but fairness is not an objective when we run an enterprise. I don't know, this might sound too bold for some of you, but I'll repeat it. Fairness is not an objective when we run an enterprise. We will be unfair with somebody. Our loyalty is to the stakeholder, to the shareholder. In increasing that value, sometimes we might be unfair, but hey, I'll be fair in my personal life, I'll be fair in my corporate life, to the extent possible. But when I have to play it safe, even if it is unfair, better be safe. That is what is at stake here, right? And when as a senior manager, I look at my own self, my career, right? My earning is important to me. So what happens if I show more respect than what I feel inside? If I make a show of that, that's okay. I'd rather be err on that side. Don't fight the king's supremacy. Don't pretend that it doesn't exist. Use every small opportunity to show that you accept it. Because we've seen the first one, right? The king has his own fears, that everybody is out to get him. It's such an imbalanced state of affairs, right? One man wielding so much power. It's a very unnatural state, and it is not in equilibrium. A small disturbance can throw that off balance. Therefore, he's constantly suspecting, constantly testing, constantly paranoid. In fact, Intel's chairman wrote a book called Paranoid. Leaders are paranoid. That's what sometimes makes leaders. So if you're senior management, recognize it. That paranoia is not misplaced, right? You need to constantly give assurances that you're not a source of danger. That's what all these small things show that. One more thing, courtiers spend a lot of time with the king. Very high chances of misinterpretation. You had one round too many in the night, and God knows what happens after that, right? Any remark could be taken as, your inner feelings being different or whatever, right? And we also know that familiarity breeds contempt. You see the same face for 5 years, what happens? You think you know that face well. So given the amount of time these leaders and senior management spend together, given what is at stake, extra care needs to be taken with respect to small things, not to offend, to please. And body language becomes paramount, becomes very, very important. Therefore, we actually see that many people stand up in their seat when their CEO calls. CEO is actually not in front of them. But still, while taking the phone call itself, they stand up. They have kind of hypnotized themselves to ensure that none of their actions ever will send a wrong message. You might find it funny that, and this is not psychophancy. I understand what we're talking about, that everybody has to say, Ji Huzur, you have to do salam, otherwise you have no future. No, that's not it. This is only the downside. You're protecting the downside. Because, as I said, so much is at stake, so much can go wrong, you ensure that it doesn't go wrong. Finally, what is said, unpleasant truth has to be spoken, but only when it is profitable for the enterprise. Psychophancy is not speaking this. That's a key difference. Show respect, but speak the truth, be bold, go against the king where it is required. We see that happening many times. Vidura speaks against Dhritarashtra's decisions. Dhritarashtra was okay, therefore he let Vidura be. When Vibhishana spoke the same with Ravana, you know what happened there? In there's the old principle that a king cannot take a decision on his own. Whatever decision kings take, the Sabha has to approve it. only then it gets implemented. So when Rama declares war on Ravana, there is a sabha in Lanka in which Vibhishana says, what you have done is wrong, please return Sita. Now Ravana insults Vibhishana, he is expelled, whatever. But he could not act because in that sabha, a very valid point was raised. So he called one more sabha. This sabha rubber stamped his decision, only then war was made. Right? So there are also certain rules for the king as well. And the councillors are expected to speak against the king when required. And if they speak, the king kind of cannot brush them off. It's like in modern democracy, right? You have to convene the assembly once more to get what you want, or the tamasha is happening in Britain. Or even in US actually today, right? But yeah, similar principles held. So while they do have the right to speak, it is to be used very, very carefully, that's all. Behavior in the absence of king is also important because there are spies we talked about. King is advised to have spies, right? Especially bribes. This should be done actually in most procurement positions. We must have, for example, in consumer companies nowadays, it is common to send decoys to see how consumer service is being done. I think we should do it for bribes and honey traps to avoid sexual harassments in future. That's what I feel more and more the way I see what's happening and what I read. There are also some unstated implications. When we say speak only when asked to, the meaning is this. The king has a right to ask for advice, but he has no responsibility to convey what decision he took. Okay, let's think that you're a software company, there's a product engineer, you're giving advice about features. The CEO will listen, but he doesn't have to explain to you what decision he has taken or why he has taken. Many people confuse that just because you're asked for suggestions means that you get a right to kind of sit on the decision. No, you don't. The framework is very, very clear. It's again against what people read as modern management theory. It is called buy-in. But buy-in is required only when you're required to implement the decision. But when it is only thinking session, brainstorming session, all that the king is asking for is, what do you think? I will do as I please. Let's understand. So I'm trying to state it in as many words as possible because this seems to be missing. That's the implication of speak only when asked to. Do not speak ill of the king in his absence because there are spies, opportunities, colleagues will report this, very common. Sometimes they'll report it even if you've not said in so many words. They'll kind of twist the words as well. Accept a task with alacrity. And kings don't like those who think of themselves as learned. Again, very important. Most managers tend to be learned. And that's a bad thing. If they display that or if they think of themselves as learned. Because, in the leader's point of view, knowledge is there for hire. You want any expertise, you pay money, you get it. You want the best structural engineer for a 40-story building, very good. Bombay, there are consultants, you pay the money, they will do it. Knowledge of civil engineering is not great for this real estate builder. What is great is the vision and the ability to take decisions. Can I put money behind this 40-story tower? For him, that's what is important, right? Similarly, every other knowledge for the leader is for hire. And the guys with this knowledge tend to think highly of themselves. That's where tensions start. So one thing that we clearly see is that why this interface with hierarchy. If somebody thinks I have more knowledge and kind of displays that thinking, it is a challenge to the hierarchy. It is a challenge to the order that the king is above the minister. These are some of the unstated implications. Now, from all this, you might think that, hey, what we are saying is be obsequious, be almost a bhakta of the king, like we say Modi Bhakt nowadays, right? No, that's not what Mahabharata is preaching. If this is the prescription for the party workers to be Modi Bhakt, there's also prescription for Modi here, right? I give you 36 virtues of a king. I'll actually not elaborate on them because it is more or less all the good things that we are supposed to know and do. But all that I'm saying is this is not one-sided. Just like there are rules for these ministers, there are rules for these kings. Both of them don't follow them to the full. but then this is theory, right? This is the way you think, this is to ignite your thoughts, let your juices flow, and kind of decide what works best in what role. Because in senior management, you're both king and minister. You're king in your department, minister to your CEO, right? So all of these also apply. I mean, he should observe his duties without wrath and malice, should not abandon kindness, etc., etc. Okay. He should never inflict punishment without careful inquiry. He should never disclose his counsel's point number 18, very important because this is stated in so many words. The king should not reveal his decision. Why? What is the need to know? It feels good that you participated in your company's decision making, but do you need to be in that? When you are supposed to implement it, then buy-in is required. Then you need to be convinced it's the right thing to do. But in so many decisions, the people who contribute towards a decision, it's just a feel-good factor. So work is not a place where you want to feel good. Work is a place where you make a difference, where you add value. Right? If people who do not know about these things know about it, there's actually a danger of leakage. Especially things like new features. We just discussed, right? An engineer talking about new features. So today we have this copying of features all around. So at least till they're released, they should not be clear, right? Once they're released, people will know about them. So these are some of the things that we see from the king. There are also other things like point number 34. Having slain his foe, he should never indulge in sorrow. Right? I mean, being a king is difficult. You cannot be soft there. Some of them also will be along those lines. Next one. So as concluding thoughts, I would reiterate some of the things. I submit that there's a common landscape where stakes are high and small changes or mistakes can lead to big implications, big consequences. Capability is important, but the other aspects need to be considered in recruitment. Just one case study, used case that we have seen. We must test integrity. This, at least to me, seems very clear. It's really foolish to appoint people at very senior positions where their whims can kind of influence hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, but not really test it. You'll be surprised how much nice wine can swing people. No official bribe, but play golf with them, wine them, dine them. Suddenly, you are a favorable vendor. Stupid, really. We should test them. We need to accept existence of a hierarchy and demonstrate that acceptance. Advise, but do not expect to be kept informed of decisions. When inevitable, communicate unpleasant truth. Virtues prescribed for king as well. That's what really we've seen. I'd like to end with one thought that leading is a tough and unpleasant business, right? All said and done, this is not the natural state of affairs. So we must do as much as possible to make it as pleasant as possible at the surface level, that's all. That's all that I take out from this. I don't take out psychophancy from this, but I see that it's pointless to introduce unnecessary frictions and irritations by trying to show that we are all equal. Is the overarching theme, or trying to kind of fight the order of things at workplace. So, I mean, I now work in a multinational company, Microsoft, which is amongst those top 100 in terms of revenue earners. I also worked for other companies like Wipro, and also worked in small Indian companies. And this really, I see that in both these places, similar principles are applied, but the spin given is different, that's all. It's not that they are not applied, but what I do see is that we do not formally discuss those. We don't have literature kind of confronting these issues and letting different opinions come in. That's why my talk was titled Towards an Indian Framework. So let more of this discussion happen. Let us be more sure-footed on what is done or what is not done. Thank you.
How loyalty is judged? What are the factors to be taken into account? Of a CEO or of an employee? What are the factors to be taken into account while judging the loyalty of a CEO or an employee?
As I said, it is not my intent to really prescribe, but I would say that everything depends on the particular situation, right? For example, we have CEOs now bringing in their own loyal employees. So it's when you recruit a CEO, actually you also kind of recruit 20 other people who are going to come in his wake. So we need to understand what is the loyalty of the CEO towards his own career or to adding the value. And one might not speak more openly about some of these tests, but yes, tests are very much possible to just discriminate this one aspect. Is this guy more wedded to, or this woman more wedded to her own career or to adding value to where she is?
The company. And the one who did not shift the company when it was in troubles. Are these factors to be taken into account?
See, again, more often than not, these judgments, one help the company stood in times of need, is usually made by the employee concerned, not by the CEO concerned. Because the moment that CEO makes a decision or things like that, the decision follows. Right? If somebody is loyal, why will not keep him? More often than not, it is that the employee thinks differently, the CEO thinks differently. The CEO thinks the employee only has done his or her duty. So, if you ask me as per Shastra, it tells the king not to take decision in a hurry. And in fact, that's where the council comes in the sense that the king is told never to take a decision on his whim or fancy. He is supposed to talk to his advisors. What do you think about this employee? Right? That's what the council is for. And even if one strong opposition comes in the council, there's one more meeting rather than a summary decision. So all Shastra promotes group decision making. That's why you have panchayat, where 5 people are there. If you want a witness in a crime, police do panchanama. 5 people must be there. The power of this 5 is, in fact, the Veda says, Pangtamva idagum sarvam. Pankti means with 5 people there, right? A line is somebody with at least 5 people. The principle behind that is what you see in Kaun Banega Karodpati, audience poll. 5 people together are more wise than one expert. I can give you the probability behind that, mathematics behind it. It's basically Bayesian probability that if the probability of one person being wrong is 0.2, all the 5 being wrong is 0.2 raised to the power of 5, which is less than some 0.05 or whatever. So if you can get this Bayesian probability to work in your favor, your group of 5 will make most of the times the correct decision. That's the power of council. That's why we have this 5 thing going everywhere. In Sikhism, we say Panch Pyara. Right? Guru was replaced by the Panch Pyara, etc.
One is when we were talking about the team, forming a team.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Prashant Sinha. I'm heading the business incubator at BITS Pilani Hyderabad campus. So basically, I work with the startups in our campus, both as a student startup and entrepreneurs from outside. So I have some 20 years of experience in this domain of startups and all. So basically, when I judge a business plan, so I really emphasize on the team which is working on that idea. So well, I have some experience. It's not a bad experience for me, but a bad experience from the startups which I have learned. And a few of your slides, the first few slides that you were talking about the team management. So taking a classmate as a team, so who knows your secrets or you know their secrets. He can be a subordinate to you, he can be a CEO to you. So that formation. So generally I see if 2 friends or a classmate has formed a company, generally it breaks because there is a for granted natures that the friends have. And during the student startup age. So how do you substantiate that a classmate makes a good team? It's like I hire somebody in as a subordinate in this slum, that's whatever is going on, and that guy takes me for granted for everything, and I cannot be his boss. I can be brutally blunt. I hope you got the.
I completely get it, sir. Even I am exposed to scores of startups, 20s of startups, and I feel that what Mr. Prashant Sinha talked about is actually very, very common. Startups are usually amongst friends and classmates, and usually they break up. There are two very important time periods after 6 months and after 10 years. So they're very two different breakups, but yeah, they do happen. And in fact, that would be one of the triggers for this thinking of mine. This is because we get our thinking very wrong. Once you enter a role, right, there is a hierarchy. Non-acceptance of that is the root cause of trouble of all this. Once you feel wronged, you become spiteful, you want to take revenge. And how do you take revenge? What we call in Hindi, gandagi machana, right? You have all this unsavory information, you start talking about it. That unfortunately or sadly is the truth, sir. But in the startup phase, the trust is extremely important. But immediately after you get some traction, hierarchy is important. So we need to figure out ways of doing it, and as mentors, maybe you should kind of talk about that, how this transition has to happen, not merely amongst the founders or the CEO, but amongst other people in the startup as well.
Generally, I ask this question to every startup: are you friends from the same dorm or hostel or a classmate? And when they say no, we are friends. So I generally try and discourage. They will start taking you granted. I show them a negative picture of that. But still, we have really good startups with friends doing Vinny Bansal and all which happened. So the other question is, it's like when you were talking about the royalty, when it's a royal blood, it's like if I've taken that thing wrong from that knowledge, it's like a royal blood will, it's like if my father was a king of Telangana, so I would be a king again. So is there it's like this should be the nature of companies? Generally, means that what Lala company you talked about, that happens. But in ThoughtWise it doesn't. Sunil Pichai is now one of the greatest in Google. So that really exists in the current political system also. This is going on. So what would be your take? Means it's going towards some destruction, or means like how this sustenance can happen, and the cycle of getting a new king with a better vision, how does it work, sir?
As I promised, no sugarcoating. If scripture says that this is a condition, it says that. I just present it. Now, what do I think of it personally? Where it is inevitable, I kind of recognize it. KCR's son is going to be prominent among TRS, right? For you and I to make difference in TRS is going to be difficult. So I just want us to be cognizant of it, whether it is right or wrong. Yeah, when I'm the victim, it feels wrong, but maybe without knowing, I'm also doing certain things like that. I don't know what I'll do with my own son and daughter, right? So as far as Shastra is concerned, you will see that they just take it as one of the factors. So while royal blood or ministerial blood is, we've talked about ministers here more than royal blood. The moment coronation happens, the moment appointment happens, when that kind of discussion gets closed. At least that's been the view that I've seen in Shastras. But I do wish that we get away from all this, that we get what is due to us based on our efforts in this particular birth. But are we there? Looks like not yet.
Last question. One second. Please take it offline. Okay. I think that gentleman, Mr. Rangnath, he was making the hand before you. Let him ask that. After that, you can ask. Yeah. Oh, yes.
This test apply to the king himself. When you're talking about piety, wealth, lust and fear. And I'm asking you in the context of Satya. Look at Ramalinga Raju. If all the sales heads would have put their net profit together, they would have told him that, listen, what you're telling is wrong. But none of them did so. Now, where is the law for the king with regards to this? And the same person today is now starting another company along with the head of HR who said that there are only 1 lakh employees and you were paying them for 1.45 lakh employees. So what are we talking about? The king having made a mistake, is there a justification and a rule for the king?
There is a test, but not when you're made king, but when you're a prince. If there are multiple princes, there are tests prescribed, and only the eligible prince gets to become the king. If you want a more well-known example from, again, ancient epics, when Dasharatha wanted to crown Rama as king, he was very careful to send Bharata away, right? Because Bharata was promised that kingdom. At least the promise was made to Kaikeyi. He first ensured that Bharata was sent away. Then he made a huge sabha and got an approval in that sabha for Rama as the next prince. And that's how it goes on. So at least the old framework, what was required was major decisions needed to be discussed and approved. In the case of Satya, more than the head of sales, I would kind of blame the board of directors. There was a Harvard professor there. There was a fiduciary duty to examine these. And like Vibhishana, if something is going wrong, it was their duty to kind of speak out. Having said that, if you look at call health now, it's a simple practical matter that people look at what is good for them, right? The feeling, at least amongst call health employees, there have been again 2-3 overhauls within call health, seems to be that I don't care about the ethics of the owner behind the screen, because Mr. Raju's name is not even associated openly. I'm only worried about my career and whether I can stay here for 2-3 years and then go to a next bigger role. They're just looking after their own interest. But if you, from the framework point of view, it would really be the advisors or the counselors or the board of directors whose task it would be to kind of call this out.
I wish to congratulate you for your decent presentation. Coming to my introduction, I am Professor Narsingh Rao, representing Urban Development Research and Training Institute located near ECIL in Hyderabad. Sir, at one point of time in your presentation, you made it clear that every human being, all the human beings are imperatively capable. I wish to agree with this point, but in spite of making rigorous efforts and trials also, only some of the human beings are becoming successful and many of them are failing in their ventures. What are your kind suggestions for the rest of the people to become successful in their ventures?
We are deviating from the topic, but I just take 30 seconds to answer it, sir.
Can I say one thing, sir?
No, I wish to hear from him. I wish to hear from the professor.
Sir, who is maybe in the early 20s, right? As long as they are not kicked out of their home by their father, they will not accept the best job available to them. They will keep talking about more education, dreams, going abroad, everything but working. The day it becomes inevitable, they accept the best offer available, even if it is driving an Uber. The key is they have to be thrown out. When it is inevitable, human beings start accepting reality and start working. In fact, we see in the software industry that you give 10 trainings, nobody will learn a thing about a new technology. But you simply tell them in their new role, they have to deliver this project in 3 weeks. It's called a sprint. Suddenly they know the technology in 3 weeks. Because otherwise their job is gone. That's what at least I've observed. So I have a slightly colorful word for it. I cannot say it yet openly here, but it is kick on your backside in Hindi. That's what works.
Sir, my question is the dominant. Yeah, my name is Satya Kiran. I represent a group of institutions called Anurag. My question is the dominant management/leadership literature of today talks about egalitarianism, it talks about open communication, it talks about equality, it talks about transparency, which is necessitated by the modern corporation. My question is, having heard you, how consistent are the lessons and insights of the Shastras to the current context? That's very important, because there seems to be a lot of inconsistency between some of the prescriptions of our own literature and the demands of the modern corporation.
Thank you for really coming to the rest of the entire thing, sir. I'll give examples of major successful CEOs. Steve Jobs. Okay, in Apple, he is the smartest man. In Amazon, Jeff Bezos is the smartest man in the room. In Microsoft, Bill Gates used to be the smartest man. So if you actually look at practical implementation of this, right? A lot of lip service is paid. Again, sorry for not mincing my words and speaking openly. We have a very senior person from Salesforce.com here. Privately, we kind of agreed with this. A lot of lip service is paid for all these values. Yes, there is open office. Even the CEO is hot desking, sitting at any which desk. But as I said, this is the surface level pleasantry, which even Shastra speaks about. When you go back to the king's duties, the king is given a laundry list of duties, right? He is to treat ministers with great respect, etc., etc., etc. But let's not really have any misconception. This is only at the surface, at least in my view. When it comes to the real stuff, when you remove the velvet gloves, there is a fist of steel inside. And there is hierarchy. And I almost know of no company where egalitarianism also gave results. To put it in popular parlance, nice guys finish last. I've studied many companies, have many case studies. The real essence, is this really happening anywhere? No. That would be my take.
One who knows Shastras very well fail in execution. In every time, should we tell him?
Aristotle. Aristotle was the greatest philosopher in Greece in his time, but he could not even succeed as the head of the academy, as the institute where Plato taught was known as, right? He could not get what was due to him. We all know of Plato and Aristotle, right? But after Plato died, Aristotle could not take his position. So he went away from mainland Greece to a very far off, what Gandhara is for in Mahabharata. Macedonia was for Greece in those days. There's a king named called Philip there. He had his 12-year-old son Alexander. And this Aristotle taught Alexander, who conquered the world, at least as was known to the Greeks, in his 20s. The master knew Shastra. He could not get the job of VC or a director or whatever.
We do, huh? My name is G. Mohan. I was a professor at Administrative Staff College of India. So my question is, in today's terms, there are lots of gig workers and freelancers and management consultants who are not in the system. So do the Shastras have anything for these outsiders who are assisting the companies and advising the CEOs or advising the Raja?
They would actually fit into the role of counselor, sir. The counselor kind of speaks when asked to speak, gives advice and vanishes. And afterwards the king does as he pleases, as we see with consultant reports. Only when the report is in the direction that the CEO wants, it gets implemented.
Just for example, C.K. Prahalad started Praja. He was world's #1 strategy professor. Michael Porter started Monitor Group. Both of them failed badly. So they gave advice which made billions for CEOs, but their own companies went kaput.
Sir, my name is Siva Prasad. I am a corporate trainer. First of all, I would like to congratulate you, sir, for that extraordinary presentation on an excellent topic. Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much for suggesting all of us that there's a wealth of wisdom exists in our scriptures that we can learn from, and you seem to have a great command on that. Thank you, sir. My question to you, sir, today, interpersonal relationships at CXO level, I could learn a lot of things from you. CXO, while dealing with his master, with his king, but for you to perform your responsibilities while you have a good interpersonal relationship above, you also ought to have good interpersonal relationship with the people working under you. So, have you not covered that part? And or should I take those 36 virtues of the king that you said who should possess? So these people should also possess the same in order to manage the people below?
short answer, yes. Slightly longer answer is that I'm only saying that this is the field of the pragmatic, of the practical. So there were a few remarks there that we are, as a CXO, you are not out there to be fair. You are out there to be effective. So if you have 10 people, you want to promote one as team lead or whatever, you still look at what is a safe choice. A king is actually similarly advised. So it's kind of the obverse of what we saw here. Because of lack of time, we could not focus more on that. But in fact, if you look at Mahabharata, Shanti Parva, and also Anushasana Parva, the advice to king is kind of 10x the advice to counselor. So there's a lot that could be said.
It's like when I say a dummy, a guy has been hired with a kingship, but still he has a board, and as you said in terms of when sir was asking about the Mitres, that there you have a board of governors, you have a lot of people to report, and the hierarchy is not defined. But in an organization setup, there would be a Mahamantri, there would be a Mantri, there would be a minister. So what should be the role of that dummy king to report to, and whom he should appreciate, or whom he should sugarcoat, or whom whatever is possible to grow in an organization?
Actually, in the Mahabharata, we have a parallel. This dummy king is called Dhritarashtra. Right? So there is a story in the advice of Bhishma to Yudhishthira about 4 animals, a fox, a tiger, a mongoose, etc. But let me not repeat the story because we don't have time. But essence of it is you need to be cunning and play the strong players against themselves if you're a king. Coming to the corporate world, we did have a situation in Hyderabad itself. In a microfinance company, the CEO was quietly replaced. And the 2 key players played a major role, the CFO and the COO. They became the next CEO. And some of the investors were behind this move. And we've all followed this on Economic Times. I don't know whether you're able to relate to this company or not, but it does happen in real world as well. And the various strategies, but the message of Mahabharata is very clear. If you are weak, you are dead. You are strong, then you get what you deserve. That's how you get it. That's the unerring message of Mahabharata.
I request our President Nagesh Vishwanathan to present a token of our appreciation to the guest speaker.
I request Mr. Ramesh over there and Mr. Kala Ramnath to please join me in presenting the memento to our honored guests.
Hello. Yeah, friends, we have informed you in the last meeting about the training program to be conducted at various colleges in the Twin Cities. Like we have finalized the date, that is January 20. We got the confirmation from about 25 colleges. Like again, my request or appeal to each one of you, you can help HMA in two ways. One is you can be the faculty member. Two, you can suggest any college which needs some kind of training to the students. So your suggestions are welcome. Last time also we got some 3 or 4 people who have volunteered to train the students, right? So the date is 20th January. So we request your cooperation in 2 things. One, as a faculty, 2, suggesting some college. So it's time to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of Hyderabad Management Association. We profusely thank our guest speaker, Dr. Nori Sivasenani, for his excellent analogy drawn between the culture of the kings and today's management, or what you call it as corporate governance and ethics. He has rightly, delineated about the recruitment of friends or maybe the advice. And he has made a very good point about that devotion is not intelligence. Then he was talking about the testing, the 4 tests of piety, wealth, lust, and fear. And then he has rightly said that today, whatever be your association, you have to discharge your duties without pride, anger, and negligence. And then he has rightly said, don't give advice, but then when you give advice, don't expect that the decision is informed to you. And it was the best point, I would say. And then as I said, boss is the leader, or if the boss is wrong, boss is always right. If the boss is wrong, refer to point number 2, right? And he closed with a beautiful statement stating that leadership is a tough and unpleasant business. Sir, thank you once again for your outstanding description. And I thank each one of you for attending this meeting. We adjourn this meeting for the dinner.